Over the last few months, I have tried out all of these different under sink mats to find out what are all the differences. Here are all the features that matter and the ones that don't, so that when you're looking online or in the store, you know what is the best type mat to protect your home. We're going to start out with something that you might think is the most important. I certainly did, and that is holding capacity. 3 gallons for an Xtreme mat, 2 gallons for the Basin mat, just over a gallon for the WeatherTech. It doesn't matter. Once your gear goes below the sink, the advertised holding capacity is basically useless. It is going to be a lot less than advertised under all of my sinks once I put all my stuff away. The second feature, design, is something that very much has an impact on how a leak behaves under your sink. It also has a huge impact on how a leak sensor will catch a leak. The Xtreme mat compartmentalizes a leak to a certain area because of its design. It will also keep your cleaning materials and other unmentionables out of the water, but does it? I'm simulating a small leak out of a container here, just 3 slow squeezes of water from the turkey baster. No, the Xtreme mat did not keep the stuff out of the water. Maybe it could, depending on the viscosity of the liquid, if it does not creep up the sides.
Wow. It's already 2 inches up the tube.
But in case of water here, it was able to climb up the sides of the pattern. Despite the very different bottom of the Basin and WeatherTech mat, compared to the Xtreme mat, a leak behaves the same. Liquid is contained to a certain area on the flat surfaces because it will get caught in all that stuff stored under the sink. However, the one design that really makes a difference is the WeatherTech sink mat. It breaks the mat into sections. If a leak happens in one section, it will take a significant amount of water to break into the next section. These smaller sections are a game changer for detecting leaks faster. Now let's connect these different methods of leak containment with leak sensors. If you are not familiar with leak sensors, these are little devices that set off an alert of some sort. An audible alarm, a push notification to your phone, and some sensors are part of a more elaborate system that can shut off the water to your house. I cannot stress enough on how important leak detection is. As I said in the last video, let's be real, who opens up all of their bathroom and kitchen sinks every day? No one. Let's talk about the WeatherTech mat first because of its compartmentalized design. I'm not too worried about a leak in the middle part here. In fact, a leak detector will go off sooner if it's in this section compared to other mats because there is less area. But if it's in a smaller section, it will be very hard for a leak detector to come into contact with the water. So don't put a mat in this way. Spin the mat around and keep the continuous part under all the main areas of concern. This way, you do not need to spend more on an expandable leak sensor that can handle an additional node or cable to detect leaks in separate sections. You only need one sensor. The Xtreme Mat and Basin mat are fairly straightforward in that there are no separate sections. But we will revisit why the WeatherTech design, even with its sections, is more flexible in a later point. Here's the part that I absolutely love about the Xtreme Mats sink mat. Xtreme Mats is the only company that I'm aware of that thought through the process of not only protecting the cabinet, but also detecting the leak. They integrated it into their mat. This sensor is a free add-on for the first time that you buy if you buy your mat direct. Now, I won't say that this is my favorite sensor. I have a couple more ideas on that, and I will save that for a follow-on video, but it is a very thoughtful add-on. However, it is hard for a larger leak detector to make contact with water since there's only a small flat part on the base of the Xtreme mat in the back.
This is the Residio water leak alarm, which you can see the 2 contact points really need to be in the flat area. Here's a fin leak sensor, and you can see the contact points are equidistant around the outside of the sensor. It's really hard to put 2 of them in the flat part. I'll have to put something heavy on top in order to angle the leak sensor to the side so that 2 contact points will be closer to the water.
I would also prefer a more central location for a leak sensor and be okay with arranging all of my stuff around it. The reason being that when I was doing the leak tests, I discovered that all of my cabinets were not perfectly flat and that the water pooled towards the front.
That's really high already. You can just tell from the viscosity of the water.
So the problem is now all of this water is going to have to build up all the way to the back before the leak sensor gets it. That's going to take longer to detect a leak. Avoid this by testing out your mat when you first install it. You don't have to fill it up all the way to see where the water pools, just enough so that you get the idea which way you should install the mat. So in my case, the Xtreme Mat should get flipped around. The unfortunate part is that the water has to trickle its way down to the sensor. One last thought on the design. I was a little worried how smaller stuff would stand on the Xtreme Mat, but there seemed to be enough bumps to make it work. The WeatherTech mat with different sections is a little harder. In both cases, putting smaller bottles in a plastic container is one solution, which then gives you more space to put stuff on top of that. Or cramming all your stuff together so that it is pressure fit and can't fall over is another solution. Plumbing coming up from below. If you have this situation, a flat mat is the way to go. The problem isn't cutting the hole. There are several videos on how to use the right size drill bit and then cut a straight line to the hole. The deal is, it's much easier to silicone a flat surface of the Basin or WeatherTech mat as opposed to the bumps on the Xtreme mat. Again, flip the WeatherTech mat around so you are less likely to encounter one of the bumps. I have to add that they recommend cutting this section out if plumbing comes up through the bottom of the cabinet base. Don't do that. This is a high-risk area where a leak is more likely to occur. If you do have to cut through one of the walls of the WeatherTech mat, it will be tricky because you can see right here, it's not actually a solid bump all the way through. It's concave right here. So if it's a pipe that's coming right along one of these ridges, it's more like an Xtreme mat. But still, don't cut this area out. Keep it in place. Available sizes. Unfortunately, you cannot buy all of these different mats in every size. The Basin sink mat only comes in 2 standard sink sizes, only for sink cabinets that are 22 inches deep. Not all bathroom vanities are that deep. Similarly, WeatherTech mats don't come in extended widths, which is what I needed for this bathroom. Now, this is something that I didn't consider before this video, but depending on what you have underneath your sink, you could actually buy a smaller size. I could get a smaller mat and just line up all of my paper towels, toilet paper, other non-liquid items along the outside. That would be cheaper, and a smaller area means a leak will be caught faster. That's a win-win. So when I buy my last sink mat, I'm going to do exactly that and buy the smallest WeatherTech mat. If you have an odd size cabinet, order whatever size you need so that the mat is smaller than the cabinet, or get a mat that can be cut down. The beauty of the WeatherTech mat is that you can trim down all of these different sections to fit inside of your cabinet. The WeatherTech mat is the only mat that gives you that option. The one thing you don't want to do is get an oversized mat and then cram it in so that it bends. What's the point of having a mat if the sides lay down and lets the water out? In addition, it is harder to store stuff on a curve. Number 6, who makes these mats? All 3 of these companies are American-based. Only the WeatherTech mats are made in America. Interestingly enough, there are a lot of knockoffs on the American-made one out on Amazon. The ability to trim is a brilliant idea. The fact that it's blatantly copied over and over, that tells you something. I bought 2 WeatherTech mats to go in this bathroom, and I'm buying a 3rd to go in the last bathroom. Colors. The Basin sink mat comes in white and tan. Xtreme Mat comes in gray and tan, and WeatherTech comes in black and tan. While color should not matter as much as the truly functional features, I really like the clean white look of the Basin mat. Even if, scratch that, when I get a stain on this Basin sink mat, I'll still have a nice white front that I can look at. Now let's look at the differences in the flexibility and material of each mat. This is something I discovered by testing out the capacity and trying to remove a huge amount of water. The material and the flexibility of the mats don't matter. Here's why. Any claims that say a stiff mat will hold up as better is false. The silicone basin mat will hold up just fine, even though it's much more flexible than the Xtreme mat. Second, I was hopeful the flexibility of the basin mat would make the removal of water easier. This was not the case because of the lip on the front of my cabinet. So no matter what you get, you have to remove all the water from inside the mat before taking the mat out to dry. If you don't have a lip on the front of your kitchen cabinet, maybe the basin sink mat will be easier to clean up if there is a leak. The one mat where cleanup was harder was the WeatherTech mat. You just can't hold up one side and gather the water in one spot with all the different sections. That's not a huge deal breaker because hopefully your leak sensor will catch it before it gets to that point. Third, let's look at the flexibility of the mat from an installation perspective. The basin sink mat was the easiest to install. The WeatherTech mat was second, and the Xtreme mat was most definitely third, just because it's an extremely stiff material. However, all three were fine, and installation should not be a determining factor. One reason the basin sink mat is so flexible is because it is pure silicone, which is also BPA free. While I'm not eating off of my basin sink mat before it went under the sink or after, let's say you had a project, you could take everything out, use your basin sink mat for whatever project it is to keep that mess contained, and then put it back in. I've also seen some reviews where people actually had it set up on their countertop to help protect the surface during food prep. Dual purpose is not something that the WeatherTech or Xtreme mats will do very well, except maybe holding shoes. And even then, I think those companies also have options for actual shoe mats. Maybe there are a couple other uses, but from I'd be willing to put this on my kitchen table, go with the basin sink mat. So what matters? I prefer the American manufactured WeatherTech mat because I'm also strategically flipping it around and using the smaller capacity to detect a leak faster. At a minimum, the most important features are getting a mat that fits and a leak detector to go with it. Also, what do you want your money to support? A lot of the other features don't matter unless you have plumbing coming up from below your cabinet. If that's the case, then you'll want a flat bottom mat in order to easily cut and silicone. I have totally gone hardcore into analyzing these mats so that you know what type is best to protect your home. What I did not do was go very far in the leak detection part of this equation, which is a very important aspect of protecting your cabinets from an active leak. I covered more details on leak alarms in the last video right here. In the future, I am very excited to share with you the cheapest Wi-Fi enabled leak detection system that I could think of. Cost is an important factor when adding up all the mats, all of the sensors to protect all of your sinks, but damage from an undetected leak costs more. I'll put that video right here when it comes out.